Well, hello and a very warm welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of BA Fringe, the live stream show that celebrates ideas at the edges of business analysis, whether those are new emerging trends or sometimes older ideas and techniques that we really ought to bring back into the centre of our practice as business analysts. And what a really broad and varied agenda we have for you today. Now, if you've watched BA Fringe before, you'll know that we really are live and, there is the occasional bit of chaos in the show. So do look out for the odd blooper, that's part of the fun. Now, if you're watching live, you may be logged into the Zoom room, or you might be watching on YouTube. Now, if you're in the Zoom room, you've probably got the best, the sort of best deal really, because the chat is enabled in Zoom and you can have a chat to the other folks that are there. So if you are in Zoom, be sure to say who you are, where you're viewing from, and just sort of, network. And you've got that extra sort of networking opportunity thrown in for free. If you're watching on YouTube, well, you'll still see everything exactly the same, but you won't get that sort of Zoom in-room networking. If you want to be in the Zoom room next time, all you need to do is register a little bit earlier. We do have a limited number of seats in the virtual Zoom room, so do register early, then you get that extra networking opportunity as well. Now, BA Fringe is always a very social event. And if you are on social media, as I know many of us are, use the hashtag BAFringe. That's hashtag BAFringe on LinkedIn or Twitter or the social media network of your choice. You might want to tweet out or LinkedIn update out your biggest takeaway, anything that surprises you, or even you might want to take like a virtual selfie of you watching the show. A surprising number of people do that, and it's always really, really nice to see that. So we do very much enjoy seeing your photos. Also, as a reminder, you can have a shout out read live on air. All you need to do in order to do that is navigate over to bafringe.live. That's bafringe.live. And there's a really short form there, and you just need to fill in who you are, what your message is, and we'll read as many of those out as we possibly can during the show. It might be, somebody's birthday. You might want to say thank you to someone. Maybe someone in the BA community's done something that you think deserves some recognition. We'll get into that bafringe.live form. We'll read out as many as we possibly can. So our agenda for this evening, really, really varied. We're going to be talking about digital transformation with Roger Burlton. We're going to be hearing about emerging BA trends and skills from Christina Tan. We're going to be talking about the importance of mindfulness when engaging with stakeholders with Kathy Berkidge. And we're going to hear about New Next and breaking our anchor to a weird past with Alastair Somerville. A really, really broad agenda, and I'm just so excited about the guests that have given their time to speak with us this evening. So that brings me to our first guest, someone who really in the BA community doesn't need an introduction. You may well know Roger Burlton from his role as president of the Process Renewal Group. You may know him from a keynote presentation you've seen, or perhaps you've attended one of his workshops, or maybe you've read Business Process Management, Profiting from Process, or the Business Agility Manifesto, which he co-authored. I'm really pleased that Roger's agreed to have a chat to us this evening. So Roger, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks very much, Adrian. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We always have great conversations.
We do. And one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on, so to speak, today is around digital transformation. Because one phrase I know we hear a lot in the BA community is that phrase digital transformation, and it's become a bit of a catch-all term. And I worry that it can mean different things to different people. So I wondered how you would define it, and perhaps more importantly, what isn't digital transformation?
Yeah, It's a really, really good question, because I think those of us who work in the area of helping organizations change, which is very definitely the whole community of business analysts, we are bombarded all the time with new phrases, new terminology for what often looks like, well, we've been doing that for a while anyway. And so the real question is, and there's a comedian on TV here, runs a talk show host, I'm in Canada, and he always has a section that says, is this anything? And he puts something up and says, is this something? Is this anything? Or is it just some words that we're sort of mixing around? I think we tend to do that a lot in our community. We try to find words for things that, that might be confusing, but they're maybe advantageous to a consulting firm or a technology vendor who try to differentiate. So I think there's a little bit of that in the idea of digital transformation. And it's almost like we've taken two words and put them together randomly and made a new thing out of it. And so is digital transformation, or is it even digital, is a really good question. So I'm not sure yet. I think there's a lot of natural evolution. And so first question I would ask myself and others is digital transformation just more automation? And so quite often we see people talking about doing things automated. And so people say, well, for example, we're putting software robots in to replace all the drudgery of the people in the back office, and we're going to make it much more efficient. We're going to take away errors. We can define the rules by which I convert data from one system to another system. That's digital. Well, is it, or is that just more automation, a new tool to do what we would have loved to have done if we didn't create these islands of separation of data and systems in the first place? We would never need robots if we had integration in the first place. So is that digital transformation? I'm not sure. I think it's a good thing. I think it makes a lot of sense. Also, another good question is, if I see people doing a lot of work on their spreadsheets, and I think, well, you know, maybe I can just put a little bit of a rules engine in place, and I can just have the rules engine figure out that, for example, in my mortgage application, I can do auto adjudication through a rules engine rather than have an underwriter start playing with data on their indecipherable spreadsheets. Is that digital? Is that digital? And so what I would tend to look at is I'm more interested in digitalization as opposed to digital, because digital tends to be throw a technology at something, or easily can be that. Whereas digitalization to me is, how do we bring a digital enabling technology to the customer journey and to other people's journeys sitting on the outside? So I'm using digital to help the process become better for people to use.
That's really interesting, and a lot of what you were saying really resonated with me there, Roger. And I think that the customer journey element is such an interesting one as well, because I suspect that you know, I know I and many other BAs are getting more and more involved in mapping out, you know, customer journeys. But one common question, and perhaps an area of confusion, is the relationship between a customer journey and a business process. So would you say they're different things, and if so how? And would you say that the person creating them is coming from a different sort of modeling mindset?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is another thing we tend to do as a profession. We find something new, and so we throw out the old. And it becomes, everybody has to do journey mapping now and so on. And it's actually a really good question is, are we doing journey mapping for the whole experience that someone has with us from birth to death? Or are we doing it for a particular transaction? Again, I'll go back to the example of mortgages. If I look at mortgages, when you talk to most banks or financial institutions, they tend to focus a lot on the application and approval and getting people signed up.
Yeah.
And they'll do a journey for that. But where's the journey from before that, whether they were financially fit enough to actually to save up for a down payment, be able to afford the deal, and afterwards make payments and adjustments and refinance and take money out and close up it. So what do we really mean by customer journey? Is it the life journey, or is it there's sort of the value stream journey? And so I think it's a really, really valuable thing to do, because we really need to understand the outside world, because when we build internal processes or capabilities, they should be supporting the customer journey. But I would also question, shouldn't we have been doing that all along?
Yeah.
How can we build solutions for people if we don't really understand what they're going through? And how can we be better and retain customers without doing that? So what I would say is, and what we tend to do is what I tend to do is say, okay, let me map my customer journey here. But then between every touch point over here, I've got a process. And so moving from one sort of status to another status, from requested to approved to funded to paid, in between those, from the customer point of view, I have processes that work with them. And if I want to sort of tie that back to digital, if I want to digitalize the experience they have, I now have to have one process that actually, one end-to-end process that includes the customer action and our action. And so the question I always would ask on that is, are customers becoming part of our process, or are we becoming part of their process? And so I don't see that you can, I think you need both, but they have to be well connected. And if I got good customer journeys, I can do good processes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting and quite a profound question there about, is the customer becoming our, because almost like the automation boundary moves, and both actors are sort of closer together, and there's a real boundary discussion there to be had. So I suppose, Roger, a lot of this, as we're talking, I'm thinking, there'll be organizations that will need to develop new or different, or will need to deploy capabilities differently in order to achieve this type of transformation. Would you say that capability mapping or capability modeling is something that a BA should know how to do?
Well, here we go again. Is like we have this perpetual problem of throwing words at things that different people understand in different ways.
Yeah.
So word capability, and I've done this. I've gone to the dictionary, I've gone to the Merriam-Webster, I've gone to the Oxford. I've looked at that word capability. And other than the really bad definition that says capability is the state of being capable, which violates my rule that you never use the same word in the definition. Really what it comes down to is what are you able to do? And so capability is really something that's really quite important. And if you think about it, traditionally BAs have written maybe requirements, but a requirement is describing the business's ability to achieve something, perhaps through automation. And so what I would tend to see today is that there's this whole field of capability mapping, and it doesn't mean the same as being able. It means, it doesn't really mean I am able or I'm not able. It's just a bucket of which to define where I might want to be able, or I might not need to be that able, or I might need to be incredibly able. And so the actual assessment of your ability is not reflected in capability map. It's just all the things that we might want to do. I think it's a little difficult for BAs by themselves if they're working on a small initiative to do capability mapping, because the point of capability mapping is capability sharing. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about, I'm working with an organization right now that does motor vehicle licensing and insurance and things like that. Well, it's really important you get your driver's license, but what is the driver's license used for? It's used to identify yourself. So, but how many places across that organization do they have to identify someone? Well, so I need a capability called identity management. But I might be working on a project that needs it, but there's 5 other places that you also have to identify yourself in different processes. Now, should I build that 5 different ways, or should I build one? So if you're working on something small, it's hard to see all the instances where identity management is absolutely essential. So it tends to be more of an architectural concept.
Yeah.
But what I would say is if you have go to your business architects or become one, and then ask the question, do we have a map that shows all the processes that need identity management?
Yeah.
So it's this cross-reference from process to capability, which is the important thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, fantastic, Roger. And I mean, I mean, my final question to you before we wrap up is, if you had a top tip or a top takeaway for the people tuned in to our conversation here around the idea of digital transformation, sort of in a word or briefly, what would that top tip be?
Well, I mean, what I would think is that it's several words for this. I would say it's, first of all, it's outside in. You always start with the outside world and then derive what we need to do to make it happen. Because then I can connect the dots. And with digital, you have to connect the dots. You can't have islands.
Yeah.
That's going to be critical. You really have to understand who cares and what's important to them. And you need to connect to why we do things in the first place. So back to just good old-fashioned business analysis practice. And I think that is something that you might want to have a look at.
Yeah, definitely. So connecting with that curiosity, the why, understanding the outside in. So Roger, well, thank you for taking time to have a chat with us today. I'm absolutely certain that people will want to follow you. They'll want to know more about what you do. How's the best way for people to connect with you, Roger?
You can get me, well, you can look at our website, processrenewal.com, or you can get me at roger.burlton@processrenewal.com. And I think Adrian will send a link to a little video about digital and capability, 2-minute YouTube, which people can then have a look at and get a bit more information as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put that in the email that goes out to everyone who's registered. And if you're watching on YouTube, we'll put that in the description as well, so that you can watch that video. Well, thank you so much, Roger. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Always a pleasure.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. Well, I don't know about you. I found that a really fascinating conversation, and I really liked what Roger said about starting outside in, speaking and liaising with our architects, because of course it is really easy for us as BAs to sort of think that we can do it all. And of course it might be we're in a situation where we can do some of this stuff, but actually, creating those collisions with other disciplines, reaching out and networking internally in our organizations is so very important. Okay, fantastic. So just as a reminder, if you are watching live, do feel free to submit your shout out. You just need to go to bafringe.live. So if there's a particular topic that you've heard so far that you want to celebrate or sort of amplify, you can have a shout out. Or if you've got, I don't know, if you just want to hear your name live on the airwaves, you can definitely do that as well. So we'll move straight on to our next segment. Have you ever wondered what BA trends are emerging and the types of skills that we might need as practitioners to keep up with those emerging trends? Well, I'm really pleased to say that Christina Tan agreed to present to us on that very topic. Now, Christina Tan is a senior consultant at Capita, but also a volunteer director at the IIBA UK chapter. Now, I have an enormous amount of respect for anyone that takes their own time to volunteer for IIBA or any IIBA UK, any IIBA chapter. So I think, a massive shout out to all of the volunteers globally who help run IIBA. It really is a fantastic community thing to do. So to talk about emerging BA trends, Christina, over to you.
Hi, I'm Christina, and I'd like to talk about emerging trends in business analysis, what skills we will need to develop along the way, and what we can do to prepare ourselves for the future. I'll be focusing on 4 key areas. The first key area I'd like to talk about is cybersecurity. Did you know that at least one hacker attack happens every 39 seconds globally? And when that happens, it costs small businesses around $200,000 to remediate, and substantially more for larger organizations. This brings a few considerations for us as BAs. Firstly, how prepared are we as BAs to assist our organizations should there be a cybersecurity threat or attack? Are we familiar enough with the building blocks of this topic and understanding the fundamentals such as IT infrastructure and IT networks to effectively become the bridge between IT and the business? How can we as BAs be more proactive in identifying vulnerabilities based on our fundamental understanding of IT and the business? And finally, are you aware of trending cybersecurity threats that your organizations would need to be aware of? In short, BAs would need a blend of these fundamental knowledge and cybersecurity awareness to optimize the value for the business in the future. The second key area I'd like to talk about is automation and AI. Automation is happening all around us. McKinsey estimates that around 15% of the global workforce could be displaced by automation by 2030. Now that's a lot of processes. As BAs, are we understanding our role in implementing automation projects? So we might see the emergence of new frameworks, tools, and techniques that might serve us better later on in this journey. Alternatively, we may see the evolution of the frameworks, tools, and techniques that is already available to us. The rise in the need of BAs to become key business partners to advise organizations on what needs to be automated, what selection of techniques will be used in the automation journey, and vendor assessment in the context will be imperative. Third key area I'd like to talk about is analytics. So based on IAB's 2020 global survey, it was stated that #1 reasons for businesses to adopt analytics was to increase efficiencies. But having the figures and technology to produce these figures is not enough. We need sort of people like BAs to help to put the findings into context. As BAs, I'd like to consider how aware are we of our organizations as we provide meaningful data and insights. So are we able to articulate what lies behind these sort of calculations or algorithms to our stakeholders? Are we also able to make these the data compelling enough to drive meaningful business change? Are we speaking for the data and understanding the stakeholders enough to identify what speaks loudest to them? And there's also a greater focus on sort of business decision support and the need for BAs to have this combination of skills in the analytics context, such as stakeholder management, a level of data literacy here, communication skills, and using techniques like storytelling to get the best out of these analytics tools. And the fourth final sort of topic is unprecedented problems. So we are currently living in very strange times, all of us, where the pandemic's causing some of us to question our ways of working and even our day-to-day living arrangements. So the uncertainty is also reflected in the markets and organizational behaviors. This adds layers of complexities to existing problems. So how would we tackle problems which has this added layer of complexity? Would we see new techniques emerge because of this? Would we need to apply more lateral thinking, which is a creative approach to problem solving where problems are caused by a number of variables? Would we need to sort of apply systems thinking sort of more widely than we currently are to increase, to kind of address increasing complexity of problems, and where there are less non-linear relationships between elements in our work environment. And not only do we need to think out of the box, we also need to think more holistically. Now, with all that said, as BAs, how do we prepare ourselves for the future? So there's a few things to wrap this call off. I would probably say things like learning and development and obtaining certifications to sort of nail down some fundamental concepts. We mentioned earlier cybersecurity and analytics. So the likes of IIBA does offer certifications on analytics and cybersecurity, which will give everybody a kind of a strong sort of grounding on these topics. And there could be other institutions that may address some of the key areas that we've discussed. And also to kind of complement the knowledge parts, it'll be good to get exposure sooner rather than later. So ask to be involved with your organization's initiatives. Put your hand up sometimes, because in life, sometimes if you don't ask, you might not get it. So just getting your foot in earlier in the door, getting involved as soon as possible. And I suppose not just in work, but also continue to be involved with your wider sort of professional community to hear about the hot topics and trends. There are sort of meetup groups, there are IIBA groups, there are groups like this, the BA Fringe, etc., which will be really sort of good to be involved in. And to supplement these points, it's always worth keeping on top of business and industry news for general awareness, which helps to sort of generate interesting discussions with your professional peers. And thank you for watching, and back to you, Adrian.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know about you, but I found that a really, really interesting, thought-provoking and insightful presentation there from Christina. And I mean, I was really thinking about like cybersecurity being so relevant for so many of us, both on a personal level, right? Because at the moment, like, I don't know about you folks, but pretty much the only time the landline rings here is when it's an automated robocall pretending to be like Microsoft or something. But it would be really easy to be duped. And of course, there's the sort of bigger organizational cybersecurity aspects as well, and automation and analytics. And I love that idea of, you know, actually needing to tell the story of the data. And of course, knowing that there's IIBA certification out on some of these things is really, really useful to know as well. So a huge thank you to Christina for taking the time out to really illuminate those topics for us. I just also wanted to mention that two of Christina's colleagues are running an IIBA UK webinar. The webinar is called Taking the Robot Out of the Human, a webinar to learn on the world's most ambitious automation project. And now that's happening on Tuesday, the 23rd of February at 6 o'clock. So do be sure to connect with that one. You'll see the IIBA UK address on your screen there. So head on over to that address, register for that webinar. Now, I just wanted to extend a thanks to the BA Fringe's sponsor this month. And the sponsor this month, you may have seen if you were here at the very beginning, is Serendipity. And I'm really excited because this is another side project that I'm involved with. So it's sort of an event sponsoring an event, which I suppose is a bit bizarre. But keep your eye out on the website serendipityfest.com. And also keep your diary clear on the 15th of July in the afternoon UK time. Now, you'll notice if you do go to the website, it's a bit of a template at the moment. It's a bit of an MVP. Well, it's not even really a minimum viable product just yet. But Serendipity is going to be a half-day festival probably with 2 tracks. It's going to be, it's a virtual event, but it's an event that's been designed with digital in mind. So rather than taking a real world event and converting it into a digital event, we've not had all of some of the constraints that would be there with the with a real world event. And it's going to be not just about business analysis, but it's going to be business analysis, business change. There might even be some project management there, but we probably need to get closer to our project management colleagues. Business architecture, we're going through the process right now. We had probably about 3 or 4 times as many speakers apply as we have room for, which for the first event is just phenomenal. But the reason it's called serendipity is we're really, really enthusiastic about creating connections between people who probably wouldn't have met otherwise. So as well as perhaps traditional sessions, you can expect some slightly curveball sessions, but also the opportunity to actually network and meet with other people from around the globe. I'm working with Vince Mirabelli in Toronto on this as our sort of side hustle, our side project. Now it's going to be about half a day, and you might now be thinking, well, how much is it going to cost? Because obviously conferences cost money, don't they? And you might even have a figure in your head of what you think a half-day conference with a whole bunch of speakers and the ability to network is worth. Well, I am pleased to tell you that it will be completely free. It will be sponsored, so we will be making the money to have the platform and such and cover the costs through sponsorship. But our plan is to remove the barrier of entry, so as many people can actually attend as possible, which makes the networking even more valuable, and so on and so forth. Can't tell you a lot more about it right now because it's still in the planning, but keep that date free in your diary, the 15th of July, and tell your friends, because the more the merrier. So yeah, absolutely, keep that free in your diary. Okay, so remember, we are live. If you would like to submit a shout out, you just need to head on over to bafringe.live. That is bafringe.live. But I'm getting a signal now that I'm overrunning, so we can't actually look at any shout outs just now. I will learn one day to actually stay to the time that we have on this cue card. Okay, so let's move on to our next segment. Have you ever had to deal with a tricky stakeholder, or have you ever perhaps found it hard to engage with a particular stakeholder? And have you ever wondered how mindfulness might be a useful tool for us as business analysts, change practitioners, to really connect and engage with, well, not just the difficult stakeholders, but just the stakeholder community in general? Well, I'm really pleased to say that today we have with us Kathy Berkidge, who is an Agile and BA trainer and coach at Mind at Work Consulting. Now, you may well be familiar with Kathy. You may have seen, I've done webinars and videos with her before, or you may well have seen her present or been to one of her workshops at one of the many conferences that she participates in. So Kathy, thank you very much for being here today.
Wonderful to be with you, Adrian.
Fantastic. So, Kathy, before we get on to talking about mindfulness, I thought it would be worth talking about tricky stakeholders. So, I know we talk about awkward stakeholders, but in your experience, what is it that makes them awkward?
There's so many things that can make them feel awkward in their encounters. We're all different people, and we have to respect that we are all coming from different angles. So a few things that can make things really awkward, for me, one of the biggest ones, which happens too often, is we ask them to meet with us, to talk with us, or we give them a meeting invite, and they don't have the context of why we're talking to them, what we want from them, what's it all about, is there a project, what's happening, and even they'll be we're questioning them, quite often grilling them for requirements of something that they may not have the full background story to. So that can be really awkward when you're sort of going, oh, didn't the PM or the sponsor or someone tell you? So that can be a real awkward moment. So we need to sometimes explain that context. Another really big problem is the history. We don't know the history, depending on, again, not knowing where many of our BAs come from, but sometimes there's a back history with this stakeholder and the subject matter that we're talking to them about. And they may have a bit of a bad taste in their mouth because something in the past didn't go quite to plan. And we're coming in without really knowing their history. So then there can be a lot of resistance there, a lot of, well, it didn't matter what I said last time. Why should I talk to you this time? You're not going to care or you're not going to do anything. There's that lack of trust. And that makes it really awkward because perhaps we're new to the project. We've never engaged with this department or this area before. And suddenly we're tainted by the brush of projects past, so to speak.
Yeah. It's interesting. I remember, Kathy, hearing an expression a while back which really resonated with me, which is, you get the stakeholders you deserve. And at the time, it made no sense to me because I was dealing with really tricky stakeholders and I didn't really feel like I deserved tricky stakeholders. But I guess over time, I've come to interpret that as, well, if you don't invest time in getting them up to speed with the background, if you don't invest time in engaging and participating, then actually they will be tricky. And actually they're not being tricky. As a BA, I'm being tricky because I'm not engaging with them properly. Would you agree with that statement that some of the time we get the stakeholders we deserve?
I absolutely love that expression. I really enjoyed the article you wrote similar to that because, it's that failure to do that research and to build that initial rapport and that background story. So you do need to create that connection first before you launch in and start grilling them about their requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us on to the topic of mindfulness, Kathy. And I know this is a topic you and I have talked about many, many times. And I always, when we speak, I always thank you for reminding me how important mindfulness is, because I remember when we first met, you were a real catalyst for me taking a bit more time to get some headspace. But for anyone who doesn't know what mindfulness is or isn't sure about it, how would you describe it and how can it help us engage and work with stakeholders?
So mindfulness is really popular when you can't turn a corner without reading something about mindfulness. It's all over social medias. It's even in bookshops nowadays. There's all sorts of mindfulness books. So there's a lot of different interpretations, but I just bring one quick and simple way of describing it. It's an awareness. And an awareness in the real time as we're going about our day of what's really happening in our external environment, what's really happening around us, as well as what's happening in our internal environment, which is not just our thoughts and mind, but our bodies, because our bodies can be a real clue to triggers and emotions that are maybe below the surface of our conscious mind because they're happening in deeper parts of our brain that we can pick up on. Of course, talking with stakeholders, it's all about the outer environment. So when we're more aware of what might be happening, we might be more conscious of these tricky situations that can make stakeholder engagement more challenging. We can bring to mind and think outside of our own space, so to speak, about what's really happening for our stakeholders. We can be more open and really hear things from their side. This awareness aspect has also the flip side, or another side, I suppose. It's kind of like a multifaceted gem, really, is the ability to drop our own perceptions. We quite often as BAs walk into a stakeholder interview or workshop with a whole heap of preconceived ideas. Maybe we think what we're driving towards a solution, or we think it should be a certain way. This awareness enables us to say, is it what I want, or is it what the stakeholder wants? Am I perceiving it in a skewed way, or is it really hearing what's truly being said? And when we're really aware and present for our stakeholders, we're better able to pick up on those subtle cues about what's really happening. So we can drop our own bias and our own beliefs and really hear openly, and being completely ready to drop our own perceptions to what we're really, being told by our stakeholders. So this awareness of, am I thinking it, or is it what they're thinking? Being able to check in with what's going up in there and saying, what are my thoughts here? Are they my thoughts, or are they reality here?
Yeah, which is really interesting, because I mean, sort of reflecting on what you've said there, Kathy, there's the self-awareness of how, I or you, or how we feel. There's the awareness and the picking up on the subtle cues of others. There's the fact that we all carry baggage around with us from, oh gosh, well, there was a stakeholder from that department who was a real pain last time. Well, this one's going to be a pain. Well, maybe they're not. They're two different people, and maybe someone's just going through some stuff, and so we can be more attentive, more intuitive to those sorts of signals. So, in terms of practical application, Kathy, can you give us some tips or some techniques briefly that people can take away and use?
Well, my number one, the thing that I'm most passionate about, and why I talk so much about mindfulness in business analysis and all sorts of agile spheres, is the ability to really listen. Really listen. And it sounds like such a simple thing, but very quickly when we're listening to someone, our thoughts roll, our minds wander. We don't mean them to. It's not something we intentionally do. It's one of those things that we start listening to a stakeholder and what they're telling us about the process or the solution or the software, and we start saying to ourselves, oh, here we go. Oh, yeah, this same old picadillo. Oh, I wish they'd hurry up. Oh, what's the time? I've got to get to lunch. Oh, sorry, what were you saying? It happens. Our minds wander too much. It's a natural state of our mind to do this. We want to stay with all the exciting stuff. We like the attention-grabbing stuff. So our mind often wanders, and that means we're not truly present.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it, Kathy? And as you were speaking there, I was thinking about how, I know that my mind wanders more now because of the plethora of distractions that I inflict upon myself. And I know I'm my own worst enemy on this, but I think about, well, like today, for example, I know I've been using WhatsApp, I've been using email, I've been using LinkedIn, I've been using sort of other internal, other ways of messaging clients through sorts of platforms and things like this. And sometimes it's hard. It's mentally hard to shut all of that stuff out. But actually, very rarely are any of those things actually urgent. Very rarely do any of them actually need an instant response, but it becomes like a compulsion, doesn't it? Like, a text message comes in and you must reply. Actually, the way of slowing those things down sometimes is to slow down the reply. Or maybe I'm just annoying everyone that I deal with and that I speak to. I don't know.
I'm sure that's not the case, Adrian. I think it's wonderful that we can bring awareness into, hang on, I don't need to reply. I can bring awareness and say, why am I compelled to reply? And we can quell that urge and not let it take hold of us, so we can refocus on the stakeholder, the matter at hand. So it enables us to stay focused and resist those urges by simply bringing awareness into, why do I feel compelled that I have to check my emails 50,000 times a day?
Yeah.
So it brings that awareness in. So by being aware, we can then choose our reaction or our response. We quite often say, without thought, we quite often react. We just pick up the phone and start doing it without much thought. Yeah. But mindfulness flips it and says, hang on, let's bring awareness. Oh, now we can respond in a more calm and considered way without feeling like we've been held hostage to a knee-jerk reaction. That happens. That's what our mind does.
Yeah, no, that's it, absolutely, and that taking that time to consciously reflect and consciously respond rather than go on autopilot is so crucial. So Kathy, I mean, just very, very briefly, if you had one top takeaway, you've mentioned listening, but either listening or another top takeaway, what would your top takeaway be for people tuned in?
Really about that openness, that curiosity that us BAs need to foster. We need to be open to explore deeper, to go beyond perceptions for ourselves and our stakeholders, to really think deeper. What else is going on here? Let's really get to beyond just what we think is going to be the answer. Let's explore deeply and remain curious enough to ask enough questions, and then be open enough to receive that information.
Fantastic.
And use that as a way to dig deeper.
That curiosity is so very, very important. Well, Kathy, I'm absolutely certain that people want to stay in touch with you. How can people follow you? How can they connect with you? How can they find out about how to work with you?
Awesome, thanks for asking. So Kathy Berkidge, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't follow any other type of social media whatsoever. I've closed, I never had Facebook or any of those others. So jump in, link in with me, stay in touch. You'll be able to read some of the articles. I do post quite frequently on mindfulness in connection with all sorts of different aspects. But of course, there's a few wonderful events coming up. We've got a webinar coming up it's a free webinar on the 16th of March at 8:30 a.m. in GMT, that's London time, about mindful stakeholder engagement. And for a deeper dive, we have a full half-day workshop on April the 13th from 9 to 1 London time once again, where we're going to talk about successful stakeholder engagement and building connection through mindfulness, where we're going to go through some amazing tools and techniques to really hone our skills of stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that half-day workshop, Kathy. I'm sure it'll be really, really enlightening, and will sort of be just more tools for the toolkit, more sort of practical tools for the toolkit. So for anyone wanting to find out more and sign up about that or sign up to that workshop, you'll see a URL on your screen now. It's a shortened URL, which is bit.ly/stakeholderBA in lowercase. That's bit.ly/stakeholderBA in lowercase. That will take you through to the Eventbrite page, where you can find out more about how to register for that half-day event. And if you signed up, if you're attending this live, you'll also get an email, and the email will have that link and the webinar link on it as well. So Kathy, thank you so much for taking time out to have this conversation. So much insight. I'm sure people will connect with you. So fantastic. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you for having me, and have an awesome day yourself, Adrian. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kathy. Fantastic. Well, I took such a lot away from that conversation with Kathy. It really sort of struck me the need to really listen and to focus on what the other person is saying. You know, really actually be present and in the moment. And I think I know I've certainly been guilty of not doing that. And you know, we've probably all sat in front of stakeholders, and you're just looking for confirmation of what you think they're going to say. So I really love that idea of building mindfulness and presence into what we do as business analysts. So I'm really looking forward to Kathy's half-day workshop. So do be sure to check that out, and check the webinar out as well. There'll be links to both of those things in the wrap-up email that goes out to everyone who's registered for this episode. So we've had a few shout-outs come in. So first of all, Nuruddin says, thanks to BA Fringe, Adrian, IIBA and Black Metric for gifting me an IIBA CCA exam voucher, which I aced a couple of days before. So, well, you're most welcome, Nuruddin. That was a prize awarded by IIBA. And I mean, massive congratulations, round of applause there, because to actually clear that exam is a significant achievement. I know I still need to do mine. That is one I do want to do, because cybersecurity, I think, is so relevant for well, as Christina Tan was saying earlier, so relevant for us as BAs. So I may well be reaching out to you to get some tips on that. Leslie says, love Kathy's point about listening. So often we listen so that we can respond. We get caught up in what we're going to say next, so we don't really listen, which is another really interesting dynamic, isn't it? And I recognize that. You know, when you're in a meeting, you're listening and you're thinking, well, how am I going to respond? You know, we can't leave an awkward silence. Well, maybe sometimes we can. Interesting point, that we should not just listen to respond. We should listen, absorb and reflect, because until we've heard the whole piece, we don't know what to respond to. And Natasha says, Christina is so right about needing to stay up to speed. We should pestle ourselves and our environments. Interesting thought there. Techniques like pestle and other strategic analysis tools are often thought at an organizational level, but you know, we could perhaps think about our own roles and the external factors that are happening, and apply some of our own techniques to ourselves, our discipline, our practices, and our teams. So some really interesting thoughts there. Do keep those shout outs coming in. A reminder, the URL is bafringe.live. That is bafringe.live. We'll read as many as we can out in the time that we have available. So that moves us on to our next segment. Have you ever heard the term edge users? Have you ever considered the impact of the service or process or product that you are designing on those edge users, and how defining what normal is might actually lead to bias? I'm really pleased that Alastair Somerville, who's a sensory design consultant at Acuity Design, has agreed to present to us on this very topic. So Alastair, over to you.
Hi, my name's Alastair Somerville. I work for Acuity Design. We're a design consultancy who works in accessible design for museums and public spaces, and also facilitates workshops on inclusive design and human-centered design for all types of company. Now, I'm going to start with a phrase that comes up in a lot of our projects, and it is edge users. And it's the idea that there are people who have non-standard capacities. They have differing physical and cognitive needs. And this idea of edge users comes up in projects, and it's deeply difficult, because what it shows is that people have chosen a specific perspective and a specific position from which to take the development from. People have chosen that there is a standard viewpoint, and from there, you can see these edge users. And in choosing a viewpoint, in choosing a perspective, you are creating a bias. Now, generally, this bias is towards what is known as normal. Now, normal is an idea which is about 180 years old, and it comes up in the work of Quetelet, a Belgian mathematician who was working in Scotland on analysing the sizes of Scottish troops for their uniforms. And in his data collection and in his data analysis, he came to the idea of the normal distribution curve, the idea that the standard clusters around the middle, and that there are edges to left and right of larger and smaller. Now, this idea that there is an average, that there is a mathematical normal, is in itself neutral. However, the problem is that his work occurred roughly at the same time as the Enlightenment and roughly at the same time as the development of colonialism and imperialism. And his idea that there is a normal became twisted over the 19th and into the 20th century by people who wanted to make a very specific political point. Normal shifted from being merely descriptive of an average of a group to being a measure, and it's shifted from being about the spread and divergence of humanity to being about describing the superiority of one group, and that group is white men. This is what normal became. It became not merely an idea about a standard or a typical person. It became the model of a type of person who was white and masculine. Now, this idea that normal is embedded problematically into our work continues. In the 1990s, you see the work in social psychology on the problem of weird. Now, weird is an acronym. It stands for white, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. And it was found that not merely were the people doing the research weird, but actually the target groups, the people used in the research, were weird. And so instead of social psychology showing and describing the behavior of humans, what it was in fact describing was the behavior of white men. And this is the problem. Normal creates a bias towards itself. It creates a bias towards the needs and wants of white men. And you see this problem now in the development of machine learning and artificial intelligence systems, where people seem surprised that the systems rapidly develop deeply sexist or deeply racist views. And yet this is what happens because the data sets and the data tools are designed to do it. Because normal became contaminated with the idea of white male superiority, the tools, both in the way that you collect and analyze, will always prove that white men have greater needs and wants above those of women and above those of black people. And this is why I speak of new nexts. In this period, when people are often talking about new normals, the thing we most want to do is get rid of the anchor to normal. Normal biases us to the needs and wants of a very tiny, historically powerful group of people. If we want to actually create global change, then we need to break that anchor and talk of new nexts, a multiplicity of futures, working with people across the world to find and develop new data sets, new data analysis tools, so that we can create a new products and services that meets the needs of the majority of people who live on this planet. Thank you.
Wow, I think you'll agree that's a really, really interesting, insightful sort of mini presentation from Alastair there. I'd not heard that expression weird before for, you know, westernized, educated, industrialized, democratic. And I really like that expression that normal creates a bias towards itself. That's one that I think is going to be buzzing around my head for weeks, if not months. I need to let that sort of incubate a little bit. But massive thank you to Alastair for taking time to prepare that presentation for us. So we're just about out of time. So all that's left for me to say is a massive thank you to our guests, to Roger, Christina, to Kathy, and of course to Alastair there. A massive thank you to you for tuning in live, or indeed if you are watching the recording. The next episode of BA Fringe is streaming on the 18th of March. Now remember, these do tend to get quite full, so why not register for it straight away? You will find that a link will be appearing in the chat right about now. I've got thumbs up, so it has gone into the chat. So why not go ahead, register now. You can always cancel if you can't attend later. So feel free to, to sign up, and if you can't attend, cancel. If you register now and opt in, you'll get a link to the recording, even if you don't attend, and even if you subsequently cancel. So do feel free, and then you can get the recording. Also, a massive thank you to everyone who has helped make this happen. This, as you can probably tell, is a lot more than just a webinar. It takes a lot of technical coordination. I'm always amazed it comes together at all. There have been episodes, and those of you that have tuned in since the very beginning will know there have been episodes where it very nearly hasn't happened. We've got a lot more slick over the months, but as always, a massive thank you to Matt, who does all the production, the technical production, the on-screen graphics and other bits and pieces as well. Stay tuned for other events. If you're not connected to Blackmetric on LinkedIn, do search for Blackmetric Business Solutions on LinkedIn. I'm also doing a new LinkedIn live show. I'm aiming for about once every week or couple of weeks, just 15 minutes. It's called On the Spot, and it's about, relevant topics for the business analysis, business change, service design type community. So keep an eye out for that as well. And don't forget, if you want to be on BA Fringe, or if you want to do a webinar, please, please, please get in touch. The vision behind this has always been to create a platform for the sharing of ideas, and BA Fringe is about ideas at the edges. So, you don't have to be a polished speaker. You don't have to have your idea fully formed. Please drop me a line. Would love to hear from you, and we'll get you sorted out in a future edition of BA Fringe. But until next time, thanks again to everyone who's tuned in, all the speakers, everyone who's helped make this happen. Stay safe and see you very, very soon. Bye for now.